Friends, welcome to Season 3 of Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney, that's Nick Zararis, and Nick, the Rangers made a big trade earlier this week, which we'll get into in a second. Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey traded to the Colorado Avalanche, but after winning last night, Nick, I don't know if you know this, they are once again just 2 points out of a playoff spot. They're dead, but they're not dead yet.
Just when I thought I was out. I for a month now, it's been, they probably need to win, 60% of the standings points remaining to get back in. And then you look around the East and realize, oh, wait, everyone else is terrible too. Like we were talking about it before we went live. Every single team in below the first wild card spot in the East has a negative or even goal differential. The Rangers are the only team in the Eastern Conference that's not in one of the 3 divisional spots, or Columbus, that has at least an even goal differential. But good Lord, man, it's terrible. The bottom half of the East is an atrocity. You have one good week, you're right back in it. I mean, last week it was Islander fans doing the hopium. Oh, we're right back in this because they had won 4 out of 5 or something like that. And now you look at where they are. They're, I think, second to last in the East, ahead of just Buffalo. Third to last ahead of Buffalo. But, it's been a very weird season.
You forget Pittsburgh and their, I'll say, struggles.
That's a Frankenstein monster of a team. Pittsburgh is a Frankenstein monster of a team of just Dubas throwing pieces at the wall, trying to see what they can get to stick.
By the way, now the Pittsburgh's goal differential is the second worst in the league, only ahead of San Jose. Chicago has a better goal differential currently than the Pittsburgh Penguins. How about that?
Remember when all those people were talking about how the Blackhawks need better leadership? I mean, there isn't a better leader in the sport than Sidney Crosby, and that shows you how valuable intangibles are. I mean, a team with that much pedigree, that much experience, that good of a coach, and it doesn't really matter all that much if you can't keep the puck out of the net. But
the clip that Fitz shared, I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, it was just a football clip, but it was like, oh, intangibles are great, but can you throw a football? It's like,
Greg Cosell. I have a clip. I have...
All of these are great, leadership, warrior, sandpaper. Can he play hockey?
Can he make throws?
Yeah.
Can he make plays? Yeah.
That's all. We'll get into the Ryan Lindgren stuff here in a second, but that's all it comes down to. You can talk about all these intangibles all you want. At the end of the day, though, can you show it to me on the ice? Can you be a net positive? If not, then I don't particularly care.
Okay, so let's start with Lindgren because this is going to be the big chunk of the episode because this has a lot of tangents to extrapolate off of.
Yep.
I said going into this week, if they got at least a second-round pick for Ryan Lindgren, I would be happy. I got a second-round pick. I am content.
And
that is all I reasonably could ask for someone who's probably better suited for second or third pair work. He's probably going to end up playing on the third pair in Colorado, and it's unfortunate because I understand why the organization valued his traits because they're not a very physical team. They're not a very gritty team. I understand that. Anytime you get a prospect as a throw-in effectively in a trade and you get NHL games out of them, that's a win for you. I vividly remember waking up the day of that trade, waiting around all day. That trade came in pretty late in the day, if I remember correct. No, I woke up to the Rick Nash trade. The Rick Nash trade went through on a Saturday, and they woke up on a Sunday and thinking, okay, I see what they're trying to do. They're going for volume. They are going to get as many picks and prospects in here over the next handful of years as they can, and whoever sticks. And they got 3 good seasons out of Lindgren, and the wheels came off. It happens. This is a brutal sport. He's not the most physical guy. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest. He played like it. He tried.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that was his own undoing, trying to play through injuries, come back from injuries too soon. As much as we bemoan that as being selfish to a certain point where, I got to help the team. But are you actually helping the team if you're limping out there and can't really move and you can't really handle the puck all that well to begin with? So there's a lot of layers to unpack here, but this is objectively the right decision because it's very simple. What's more valuable, the second and fourth round pick Parsonen or Ryan Lindgren's 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32 seasons? Because at minimum, he's going to be looking for a 5 or 6 year deal in free agency this summer. And that number of that contract is going to start at least 5.5, if not 6, if we're because we got to account for the increase in the cap that's going to happen over the next handful of years. So someone like Lindgren, who in this flat cap market is probably worth about 3.5 in actual value. You add the unrestricted free agency tax of about $1 million to $1.5 million. You add the cap going up increase part of it, the inflation of it, and you're very easily looking at a 5 or 6 year deal worth at least $5.5 to $6 million per year. And the Rangers had the good sense to realize that's a bad idea for us. We shouldn't do that.
I'm glad. And the thing about this, too, that we have to think about is if the Rangers were smart, especially in the last 2 years, where they saw Ryan Lindgren's play essentially dwindle, for lack of a better way to say this. Like Lindgren, when he first got to the Rangers, he was a really solid defenseman that brought not only the physicality, but was able to defend good opponents to a good degree. The last 2 seasons, he has not been able to do that. If the Rangers were smarter about this, they would have stapled Lindgren to the third pairing and essentially lowered, his responsibilities, sheltered him a little bit, and also in turn, if they really valued his locker room skill set and all of these things, you could still have that while playing Ryan Lindgren less minutes and not giving him the top of the top opponents to play against every single night. And also while doing that, you make his UFA ask lower because, instead of, Ryan Lindgren seeing himself as a top pairing defenseman that plays 20, 25 minutes a night. Okay. So he's playing bottom pair minutes with, Borgen, Vakanainen, whoever, he's paired with. He's playing sheltered minutes. He's playing better. He doesn't get nearly as much as of the IRE. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't get as much of the money, sure. And someone is going to overpay for Ryan Lindgren. Maybe it's Nashville because they love doing that to guys that have a good resume, but not players that can maybe help them out currently. But like they didn't do that. So instead, they did the absolute right thing by trading Ryan Lindgren while the iron is hot. He would have walked, and we were talking about this last season when the Rangers gave him a 1-year deal. That told you everything you needed to know about how they felt about Ryan Lindgren. Because if they were gung-ho on keeping him, if they really wanted to...
I mean, look what they did with Borgen. They had a week. Yeah, they had like 3 weeks of Borgen, and they're like, yeah, we want him 5 years.
If... It's one of those situations where like if they really want you, like let them show it to you.
Yeah.
Like if it like they can text you back.
Yeah.
The Rangers could have texted Ryan Lindgren back at any moment. Throughout the off season, throughout the beginning of the season, they chose not to do that. So that gave you all the information you needed that Ryan Lindgren was done as a Ranger. Whenever that would have happened, and it happened to be a few days ago, that this was going to be the last season of him in a Rangers jersey. Jimmy Vesey, but he was good for what he provided, but the Rangers just needed the space for Othman and Berard and and these guys, and there's just not enough space for Vesey, and off he goes, and that's he was a good Ranger here for for what he was supposed to do in his role. He was fine at it. Yeah, like there's no complaints about him, and sorry to see him go. The second round pick was good. The fourth round pick was good. Parsonen, Nick and I were at the Garden last night. We were watching the game. Parsonen was all right. DeHaan was more than fine. Like he was like when Ryan Lindgren was on the ice, I was always nervous. With Calvin DeHaan on the ice last night, I didn't have to worry. It was great. I had a great time.
That's kind of, and I said this exactly to you. That's what you want from someone like Calvin DeHaan. If I don't notice you, that means you're having a good game. Because if you're a defensive first defenseman, typically speaking, you're going to be on your back foot a lot. You're going to have to be mitigating rush chances against, trying to break things up in passing lanes before they get down low. Because you're not the most ambulatory skater. You're not the most agile skater. But you got a good stick, you got good positioning, you're tall, you got a good reach, you break up passing lanes. DeHaan was perfectly fine last night. And the first real inflection point in this conversation, to pivot a little bit more, you brought up Parsonen. You can add Berard to this, you could put Othman in here, you could even put Rempe in here. Part of the reason I understand being a little bit more bullish on their playoff prospects is purely because they got guys who are hungry and want a chance. And you've got that married to, you might have pissed off the veterans a little bit by trading away VZ and Lindgren. So you got the combination of the young guys who just want to stay in the NHL and not go back to Hartford because the Wolfpack are terrible, and riding the bus in the AHL is a lot less satisfying than going to Nobu on a Tuesday on an off day. Like, if we're talking about, do I have to get room service pizza in, I don't know, Lake Erie when we're playing the Lake Monsters versus I can go to Nobu tonight because we have 2 days off in a row. Very big difference in the landscape of things. You know, it's a lot easier to post your bat signal on your Instagram story in New York City than it is out there in Lake Erie or in Coachella Valley when you're playing the Thunderbirds. It's a very different environment to be operating in. But when you have the combination of those two things, and we'll talk about the game last night in a little bit and the game against Toronto for that matter too, but you've got the veterans who probably are looking around like, what, they don't believe in us? They don't think we can do this? And look, is it stupid that professional athletes sometimes need that little bit of extra motivation kick in the butt? Yes, you would think that being competitive was kind of an inherent part of being professional, but it works. And then you combine that with the young guys who are desperate to just stay up. That's a good combination. So at the very least, you can talk me into them being hungry. You can talk me into, well, the veterans who have been underperforming all year kind of having a little bit of a kick in the butt. You know, Panarin was really good in the first period last night. Zibanejad had a really nice game as well. And then you combine that with a bunch of young guys who just don't stop skating. You know, Berard doesn't ever stop skating. Will Cooley doesn't ever stop skating. All of a sudden, you got a really nice combination of underperforming veterans who are kind of insulted, and you got hungry-ass young guys who just want to stay.
You know, I mentioned this a couple of months ago, mostly as a joke, but like this is kind of getting to that point of like, wait, maybe it's true of the like, is this team just the new version of the 2012 LA Kings, or like they make it on the last day of the season? No one expects them to do anything, and then they just go to the playoffs and just dominate. Like, listen, I'm not huffing any hopium here or copium or, you know, whichever, or, you know, like it's one of those things where I don't think it's going to happen. But the more this season goes along and the more these storylines begin to add up of like, okay, Zibanejad's playing better lately, right? He drew, and you know, we talked about this during the game, like he drew 3 penalties. He was skating out there. He was playing better. The team looked way more engaged against Nashville. Now, we'll talk about this in a minute, but Nashville did not look engaged at all. So it was easier for the Rangers to be more engaged than the Predators. Sure, but the Rangers still had to be engaged at the end of the day. And they were, and they looked good. So if they can continue that, you know, massive, obviously, game 10 against your rival, the Islanders, who you just dumpstered, what was it, last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, like, you now have to do it again. You have to get up for that. The storylines are here. The team is playing better. Like you said, the young guys are hungry. The veterans are probably pissed off because their friends are getting traded, and they don't want to get traded. There's still a lot of talent on paper, which is our favorite term here on the show, to go around. There's opportunity here for something to happen. What that could be is literally anybody's guess, because it very much depends on which version of this team wants to play the game on any given night. But given all of the ingredients, there is enough here to make an incredible dish. All that needs, like, a lot of things have to go well for that to happen. Will it happen? Probably not. The chances are low, but it's not zero. And by the day, like, the chances are slightly increasing. Again, not from like 0.5 to 35, but like 0.5 to like 1.2, 1.4, like, you know, slow increases that, you know, you kind of look around and you're like, you know what? Like, I'm you know, maybe I'm starting to see if there's a path out of this. In my head canon, the Rangers are 2012 LA Kings, and like that's just the storyline that I'm creating in my head, and like that's what I'm believing. But you start to see the parallels, and you think, okay, well, could it happen again? It's not probably won't, but I guess it could.
So with that in mind, I do want to finish off one last thought on the Lindgren, because like the Lindgren trade is a perfect encapsulation of why people like Andrew and I get mad at teams and general managers, because we spent the entirety of last season pointing out that Barclay Goodrow, Jacob Trouba, Ryan Lindgren, net negatives, outright net negatives on the team. And they kept Lindgren's minutes up. They rushed Trouba back from injury, and then Trouba said he wasn't hurt, even though he very clearly was. And they had to keep playing Barclay Goodrow over some of the more viable options, like a Johnny Brodzinski or Blake Wheeler or Matt Rempe or whomstever you want to say on that fourth line role. And you waited too long, and it's part of an overall profile of inconsistency. And that's what irks me, because the opportunity to greatly improve the team over the last year or two, if you just removed the net negatives, you would have had a lot more success than just adding, a Jack Roslovic or an Alex Wenberg. I like those pieces individually, but the net negatives of playing somebody like a Ryan Lindgren with Adam Fox for the last 3-4 years, not only did you hold back Adam Fox, you never got to see what Keandre Miller could do in a first pair role when he was still kind of in a young and ascending period, as opposed to what he is now, where he very well might have plateaued. And, last night was a good encapsulation of that. He had the great goal off the rush chance, but then he and Borgen also just looked at each other as the Predators had 3 different net front chances. There was that one sequence I remember where JT Miller threw the puck to the middle of the ice to no one in particular. Nashville missed the net. Nashville regrouped, the Rangers tried to break out, and then Miller immediately turned it over again. So, you really get the full scope of the experience. And I think I said it going into the playoffs last year, Miller's a really good encapsulation of where the team is at, because most of the time, if Keandre Miller's having a good game, the Rangers are probably going to win. And the inversion of that is true as well. If Keandre Miller is struggling, that second pair is having a hard time, they're going to have a hard time most nights. And this is all part of a bigger conversation of just, you go through all of the transactions in your head, and it's maddeningly inconsistent, because this is good process of, you identified, if we keep him, the contract will not age well. It is more valuable for us to get that roster spot and put someone else in it and get draft picks back than it is to keep him in hopes of futilely making the playoffs and probably losing in the first round. This is also the same general manager who wouldn't trade as much as it took to get a Jake Gensel, to get Jake Gensel last year, or to get a Jacob Chikrin 2 years ago, actual impactful moves based on the idea of, well, we need that next wave of guys, we need Brennan Othman, we need Gabriel Perreault. Well, by that time, Panarin's going to be 35, Kreider's going to be 35, Zibanejad will be 34, JT Miller, who's here now, will be 34. And sure, Gabriel Perreault is probably going to be a good top 6 NHLer, but by that point, you're going to need a whole new team.
Yeah.
That's why it's so frustrating at times, because these are obvious decisions. Coming into this year, you knew they weren't keeping Lindgren. You knew. And instead of, trying to reduce his role to get better production out of him, we just kept rolling him out there with Adam Fox over and over and over again. And I saw someone tweet this right before we went live. If you go and look on moneypuck.com right now, Miller and Fox still have the best expected goals rate in the entire NHL of any defensive pair with, I think, 100 minutes. And we haven't revisited that once since they traded for Will Borgen. So the process is what's maddening. The process is driving me crazy.
Yeah, and again, I go back to this because it's just such a weird quote from Peter Laviolette when asked a few weeks ago about changing the pairings, and he said the pairings were set, which didn't make any sense then, but it doubly doesn't make any sense now, especially because most of your defensive pairings are brand new.
Yeah,
with brand new faces and brand new, essentially a brand new structure. How could you turn? I understand Lindgren was still on the team at that point, but Borgen was new, Vakanainen was new. You have newer faces on this blue line. How can you turn around and tell reporters with a straight face that the pairings were set? That doesn't make any sense from a coaching perspective, nor a personnel perspective. Now that Lindgren isn't here, they are very much not set, because now you need Calvin DeHaan in here. Now you got to shuffle the lines again. Like, none of that made sense, and it just goes back to what you talked about a second ago, where you knew Lindgren was going to get out, Trouba was going to get out. All these guys were essentially dead men walking on this team for a while, and everyone kind of knew that, assumed that, kind of just waiting to see when that would ultimately happen. So if that's the case, then why not just fix things earlier? I know this is a wild statement to make, but if your ship is sinking, wouldn't you rather fix it earlier than later? Like, is that am I breaking news here? Like, is this a scorching hot take to make, that like, you knew these guys are out the door? Okay, well then, if while they're still here, diminish their role, bring up guys that are going to essentially replace them in the lineup.
Oh, we'll talk about Zach Jones. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to Zach Jones here in a minute, but like, replace those guys with the players that will, play in their stead once their trades are complete.
Or find out if they can do it or not, too.
Right,
that's another thing. Yeah.
It's just, a lot of this doesn't make sense. And it goes back to what you were talking about with the timeline. Othman is by all accounts, from people that are smarter than me and know, prospects a lot better than I do, supposedly, Perreault is going to be incredible. And that's good. That's great. But he's a few years away from that happening in the NHL.
Like, even if he comes out when their season ends the first week of April and he plays, 2-3 games as a Ranger, he's not getting it. Who's he playing over in the top 6?
Nobody.
You're telling me that a team that spent 4 years before they let Lafreniere play with Panarin is going to let the kid come right out of college to playing with Panarin or playing with Zibanejad?
You think they're going to move Zibanejad down?
Yeah, and like,
play Gabe Perreault? Are we like, come on. It's just, we, like, as much as we want these things to happen, we know this organization. You know the organization. We've been fans for long enough. We've seen the decision making.
It took
over
JT
the
Miller
course of
4 years to become an NHL regular. Chris Kreider took 4 or 5.
We've seen this time and time again, where the Rangers refuse to give young, promising players their ice time. And this will not change with Gabriel Perreault. For as much hype as he has around him, the Rangers played Colin Blackwell over Lafreniere in his rookie season, the number 1 overall pick. They're not giving Gabe Perreault more ice time than Kreider, Zibanejad, whomstever you want to add in there. It's not going to happen. He's going to play third line minutes, look really good for like 8 minutes of ice time, and then they'll call it a day. That's what the Rangers do. That is their MO.
And building off of that a little bit more, like, just when I evaluate, or when I'm thinking about a decision maker, a general manager, a coach, an owner, I don't necessarily need to agree with what they're doing. That's not how life works. I'm never going to agree with what everything else someone else does. Can I at least understand the logic? Is there a through line I can trace through the decisions? And that's what irks me and infuriates me about Chris Drury is, when he makes good decisions, he makes good decisions. He quickly realized Patrick Nemeth was not an NHL caliber defenseman after giving him that contract, and they burned 2 second-round picks to make him go away. Then, to replace that problem, you brought in Ben Harper, who is also not good enough. And then you brought in Nico Mikkola, who could have been good enough, but you looked at him and said, well, we have other priorities. We would rather do Eric Gustafsson, which that worked out very well for you. And then you let Eric Gustafsson leave because he was going to get paid more to play more somewhere else. And you said, okay, well, this has got to be the Zach Jones year, right? And then he got all of 5 games. And for whatever reason, you decided you didn't really like that, what he was giving you in those games. And
he was really good last night, by the way.
Jones was really good. And he is never going to be, and this is the same argument I've been having all year with Oiler fans about Evan Bouchard, that Islander fans are having about Noah Dobson, Ranger fans are having about Adam Fox. That offense first archetype defenseman is never going to block a ton of shots. They are never going to throw a lot of big hits. They aren't going to win leverage battles in front of the net for positioning. They're not going to win a lot of 50-50 pucks below the goal line. The value of those guys is their ability to change the game state from defense to offense quickly, and then augment offense in the offensive zone where they effectively function as a fourth forward, where their puck skills are good enough that they can contribute offensively to the degree that they're able to control plays significantly more.
And by the way, if the puck is always in the offensive zone, they don't have to defend. That's the beauty of having defensemen that are, one, comfortable with the puck on their stick, and two, know what to do with it, and three, can, like you said, let's say the puck is in the defensive end. Their ability to create something out of nothing and counter quickly is such a massive component to being a blue liner in 2025. If you have that ability, then you don't have to play defense.
Nope.
Because your team is in the offensive zone the whole time. You don't have to throw hit. Again, the biggest thing that people have to understand, you do not hit the other team
if you don't
when you control the puck. You don't have to block shots when your team controls the puck. So if a defenseman doesn't do that, it doesn't automatically mean they're bad. Their skill set is, okay, what can I do to make sure the puck is in the offensive zone the entire time?
Or as much as possible. And that's really that's the trade-off, How much offense can you create?
Sure. Within reason.
Obviously. Yeah, within reason. Yeah. That's the trade-off. And I understand that on a team like the Rangers, who have had an atrocious defense this year. I think they were 31st in expected goals against going into last night's game. And, the last night's game is a good example of why score impacts. And, I argued with people who watched the game after looking at the box score, because if someone didn't watch the game, they would think, oh, the Rangers got lucky. And then you would realize, oh, wait, Nashville had like 30 shots on goal in the third period long after the game was already over. And they kind of juiced the underlying numbers and had a puck. They had the puck a ton in the third period, but nothing.
Quick had a great game.
Quick was great last night. The one reach back save was really, really kind of crazy for, I wake up with lower back pain pretty much every day, and I'm not 39 years old. So for Jonathan Quick to be able to do that is still, at his age, is pretty impressive. But the one last thread on this before we start talking about the recent games and just the overall picture. I said last week, it kind of felt like the window of contention for this permutation of the team was closed, because this year, even if you make the playoffs, you're going to be a real long shot just to get to, the second round, let alone a deep playoff run. You think about where they're going to be next year and what they'll need. They'll have a decision to make on K'Andre Miller. They're going to need a new first pair left-handed defenseman. They probably need a top six forward or a third line center, depending what you do with Zibanejad. And then you probably need at least one more forward to just feel good about your group, because as much as we like that combination of, Othman, Berard, Edstrom, Rempe, and Perreault, if he should declare, they're not going to roll six young guys in the bottom six. No. That's just not how the Rangers or the NHL at large largely works. So you probably need two bottom six guys to supplement what you already have. That's a lot in one offseason, and you need to get it right, too. We've been here 4 years now waiting for the Rangers to find that first line right wing. It very well might be Zibanejad. We're looking for Adam Fox to get a real first pair defenseman to play with, to maybe make him better, as opposed to him needing to do everything. So there's a lot of moving parts to try and get right in a single offseason. You may or may not need to replace Jonathan Quick, who may retire after this season, though he very well could keep playing into next year. It's just a lot that needs to go right. And then everybody's a year older. Your five most expensive forwards are all 32 or older now. JT Miller's birthday was recently. He turned 32. And that's just a lot you need to go right. Last year we talked about a lot. Everything that could go right for the Rangers did. They missed Adam Fox for the first month of the season, and Eric Gustafsson was a point-per-game defenseman for that first month, and it was great. And you lost Filipino for almost the full season. And it didn't really matter because your team was so good. Your goaltending was good enough and your power play was good enough that it didn't really matter. You didn't have any secondary scoring. You brought in some guys and it went reasonably okay. You got the easiest first round matchup in the history of this playoff format. You got to play a team that you sun every time you play them in the playoffs in Carolina, where, Carolina's a good regular season team. And then, they see that Rangers logo and they forget how to play hockey in the playoffs. God bless Freddie Anderson, but yikes.
Yeah.
And that's really, and then this year has been the opposite. Everything that could go wrong for them this year has gone wrong for them. The vibes tanked almost immediately. They've been getting pretty average goaltending, which for the Rangers is bad. The power play has been slightly above average as opposed to great. The defense has been atrocious as opposed to bad. all of their stars are going to be 30 to 40% less on their point totals than last year. And you're still kind of hanging around, which is, more of a testament to how bad the East is at large. But like, you kind of probably get closer to that middle ground next season where it won't be as bad as this year, but it won't be as good as it was 2 years ago. And that's kind of where they were 3 years ago, where they came in off the Tampa Bay season and had an okay regular season, but never felt great about it. That's probably what they're looking at next year, somewhere closer to the middle.
There's, with hockey, there's so many things that have to go right at a specific time in order for teams to win the Stanley Cup. And, some good examples of that, again, like the LA team from 2012, St. Louis a few years ago, they were bottom of the NHL. And then, Jordan Binnington went on that disgusting heater and then they just won the Stanley Cup off of vibes and the good goaltending. Like, that was insane. Like, these things happen in hockey and pretty much only in hockey. Like, in basketball, that doesn't happen often at all. Very rarely do teams that are outside of the top 2 or 3 make it all, to the conference finals or the finals, or like that's not a very rare, thing to happen. Baseball, I don't know too well, but I don't think that happens often in the MLB. And in football, it's the Chiefs every year, and whomstever they play, who is also one of the top teams in football. Like, if there's ever a sport in which, like, just get there and we'll see what happens is one of the biggest keys it's hockey. So again, I go back to what I said earlier is like, there is, and albeit very small for sure, but a small percentage chance that this team looks around and says, wait a minute, like, we're actually not bad. Like, we can actually do this if we just play to our strengths and like actually play as well as we can. And then they could make it, like, they could make a run in the playoffs. Will they? I don't think so, but maybe. The chances is more than zero. Now, Nick, we are getting some trade deadline related questions. Do you want to do upcoming games here, or do you want to?
Let's do deadline. Let's do deadline because it's more topical, and it's the easiest thing to talk about because everybody plays fantasy football and likes to talk about trades and value.
Of course. So,
we were talking about this right before we went live about Kreider. It depends if they activate him off of injured reserve or not by Friday. If he's not healthy, I don't think a team would trade for him. I think it's really that straightforward. I think you very easily could get something decent for him. Nothing crazy. You're probably getting a mid-round pick just because he hasn't played that well this year. He's been injured all year. He's old, and the Rangers probably have to retain salary, and he has 2 more years after this on his contract.
Something
so
like that.
A lot of external factors kind of minimize that. In an ideal world, you would trade him because you would rather have that lineup spot for somebody like a Will Cooley, or if you want to keep it clear for Othman or Perreault, just because of where Kreider's at in his career. You also want to do right by him, but at the same time, you got to do what's right for the team. I don't think so, just because I feel like Kreider's a summer trade. I feel like if they trade him, that'll happen closer to the draft, but that's just me.
Maybe, and that question came from Matt Villano on YouTube. Yeah, the conversation, I think, stops and ends with when the Rangers activate Kreider off of IR, because they have this 2-day break from Wednesday to Saturday, this Thursday, Friday, 2 days where they don't play. So I think if they activate Kreider in that weird in-between, there's a good chance that he gets traded. Like, if he gets activated on Thursday, for example, which would be a kind of a strange day to activate, a player right after, right around the deadline, that would kind of signal to me, okay, so he's like, the Rangers are signaling to teams that Chris Kreider is healthy enough to play right now and can help you in the playoffs. Please call me. Let's figure something out. If he doesn't, if he stays on IR, I kind of like Nick said, I think this is going to be more of a summer thing. So that is really tied to what Drury is going to do with Kreider's IR distinction. We have another question from Dimitri. He says he can't listen during it, but we'll listen later. Florida needs a backup goalie. Obviously, they traded Spencer Knight to Chicago for Seth Jones and, first round pick and all that. What are the chances they go after Quick
Okay,
That's a good
0
question,
because Jonathan Quick's not leaving Connecticut. I hate to like one of my friends is working a youth hockey game this morning, and Jonathan Quick's kid is in net. Jonathan Quick's not leaving Connecticut. I've been as the host of Locked On Oilers. Jonathan Quick's kind of like the perfect backup to bring in to back up Stuart Skinner of like veteran playoff experience, and I know that's not happening. It's entirely in Quick's court if he wants to. A, stay, B, if he wants to keep going. I think he's wanted to be back closer to his family basically his whole life. And now that he's finally here, I struggle to imagine him leaving, even if it's only, till June or whenever his next team got eliminated. He's the ideal backup goalie candidate. Like if you were a good team and you wanted to get an extra goalie for the playoffs, I just don't think he's going to want to leave. And I don't even think the Rangers would ask, in all honesty, because they also don't have a third goalie they could call up to really back him up. That's the other part of it too. Because they're like, it's weird because like part of me wants to say, well, they're still trying to make the playoffs, even though they traded Ryan Lindgren. And I feel like if you go the drop off from Quick to an AHL starter is
Dylan Garand in this case.
It's significant enough where I do think that I just don't really think so. It would make sense. If you got a 4th round, 5th round pick for Jonathan Quick, you would do it, but I don't think he's going to want to leave. That's the real kicker of it.
Yeah. I would imagine that teams like Florida, Edmonton, some other teams would call.
Yeah.
And they would ask. I don't know if Drury would want to ship Quick away. And again, only because like, are you comfortable with Dylan Garand as your backup now? And is Dylan Garand the backup of the future? Now, again, the Rangers will have to figure that out sooner rather than later. And I would have to imagine that is on their list of things to do and talk about moving forward here. Because again, Quick is 39 years old. So, that conversation is going to come sooner rather than later, but they're 2 points out of a playoff spot. And Quick has, by all accounts, been not only, a great, intangibles guy, but also Shesterkin loves him. And he's been, they've been really close. And Quick has also just been good. Like, the stats aren't tremendous, but he's kind of done all he can, especially, last night, short, small sample size, but he was really good last night, made some really great saves. And would I be upset to see him go? I mean, it depends on the trade. Like if the Rangers would sell him for an Arby's coupon, then yeah, I'd be upset. But if some team was like, hey, we'll give you a 2nd round pick for Jonathan Quick, and that's not going to happen, but let's just say it does, then you absolutely trade Jonathan Quick and, and then you just bring up Garand and then have that, we'll sail off into the sunset and just essentially throw Garand to the wolves and see, hey, okay, well, we need you for like 5 or 6 of these games. Let's see what you got. And we need you to win. We need you to step up. Pressure situation. We're in the playoff hunt, and you're starting against insert team name here. You got to go out there and you got to play, and you got to play well. And there's some merit to trading Quick and then just seeing what you have in Dylan Garand from that perspective. Where if he can't step up during a playoff run where you're close and you need your goalie to play well, then you kind of already answered your question of, is he capable of being your backup for the foreseeable future? And if he does play well, then that also answers your question. So there is some merit to that. It just very much depends on what teams are going to give for Jonathan Quick if that conversation happens to come about.
Okay, so while we're on the subject, we might as well do this now. I was going to save this for later, but okay, so I'm looking at the Rangers roster on Puckpedia. The only expiring free agents after this season ends are Riley Smith, who has been held out of the lineup. He's 100% getting traded. Yeah. It's simply a matter of where.
Yeah, I brought this up to you during the game. I think because we also got a question from James Marshall on YouTube, where will Smith go? So it fits into what you were saying. I have a sneaky suspicion it's going to be some team like LA.
Someone middle of the pack that needs an extra guy. Yeah, I could see them. I could see Minnesota. I could see Detroit. I could see someone in that tier. Like, I don't think if you're like Vegas,
St. Louis, maybe
St. Louis, I don't think is going for it. I'd be weird if St. Louis did. Florida, I could see. I could see Tampa Bay. I could see
Maybe Vegas brings him back.
I could see Vegas. I could see Ottawa. I could see
Sure.
someone in that middle of the pack that just wants an extra top 9 forward. Riley Smith is fine for what he is. He's got decent defensive impacts. He's an okay penalty killer. He's going to have, 0.4 points per game this year. He's fine. He's not a bad piece if you're trying to augment your lineup. It's just the Rangers brought him in to do something he's not capable of doing anymore. He's not a top 6 forward on a cup winner anymore. He's not. He's had a nice NHL career. He's a solid pro. He'll be really cheap because the Rangers will retain on him too. So if you're adding him, you can get him at like 1.75, 1.8 against the cap. And that's, you get a top 9 forward for 1.8 million for the rest of the season. That's a steal. That is an absolute steal, and that'll help the Rangers get a slightly better return. He's probably in the market, a ballpark of like a 4th round pick, but if you retain salary, you might be able to get that bumped up to a 3rd. I think if you can turn Riley Smith into a 3rd round pick, that's good business. That's what you should be trying to do.
Sure. I mean, maybe a team like Calgary would be interested. Like they're a team. Dustin Wolf should be the rookie of the year. I mean, my man's is the only reason the Calgary Flames right now are in a playoff spot, and like 90% of that is because of Dustin Wolf. Like my man's has been incredible. And if you haven't watched the Flames, if you haven't watched Dustin Wolf play, you're missing out on some tremendous goaltending. I mean, Dustin Wolf has been sensational all year long, and he should be the runaway rookie of the year award winner. Whether the NHL wants to give a goalie that award is, I think the most deserving players should always win the award. I mean, that's a hot take. I understand that, but Dustin Wolf should be the winner. But I can see Calgary rewarding the team with somebody like a Riley Smith of like, hey, we're not going all in because I mean look at the standings, but Riley Smith is a good addition to a team that has probably earned a little bit of that coming into this playoff push. So I can see that.
So other than Riley Smith, the only other unrestricted free agent this year is Calvin DeHaan, who probably not getting brought back, but if they brought him back on, he's getting 800,000 this year.
Played well yesterday.
He was fine last night. I had no qualms with that. Yeah. If they brought him back to be the 6th or 7th guy for next season, that'd be fine. They have a lot more RFAs, Edstrom, Cooley, Kaliev, Rempe, Parsonen, then K'Andre Miller, Vakanainen, Zach Jones, and Matthew Robertson. Of that next grouping, the only one I could conceivably see getting traded is K'Andre Miller, and that's only if it were a double change of scenery type deal. If they were to trade him for a different restricted free agent, whether, I saw somebody say, why would you do Bowen Byram for him? And like Byram's injury stuff terrifies me because he also can't stay healthy at all. But when he's been healthy, he's been a pretty solid NHL defenseman, but, kind of petered out, plateaued, if you will, in his development, very similar to Miller. And we've been talking about this for a while with Miller. At 25, you're not totally done developing, but you're pretty close to what you are. And Miller seems to be a really flashy, occasionally good, most of the time okay defenseman that just makes some bad mistakes. It's a really confounding problem because 2 or 3 years ago, I would have assumed by now he'd solidify himself as the first pair lefty, and through not only his fault, he hasn't been great over the last 2 years, but also, he's been blocked. He's been log jammed behind Ryan Lindgren, and Jacob Trouba loves playing with him. We got to keep them together, so we can't break them up, even though that would probably help our team. But I really think Riley Smith is the only certainty. Other than that, it would really kind of, I wouldn't say surprising, but I would say unlikely. I think Riley Smith is the only certainty that gets moved by Friday.
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, like we said with Kreider, if he gets off of IR before Friday, I would up the percentage of him getting moved pretty dramatically. But if not, then Riley Smith is probably the only player that gets dealt at this point because the Rangers' biggest names on the board have all been traded by this point. Yeah. So Riley Smith is probably the biggest name right out there for the Rangers. I kind of, barring some surprise that I'm not foreseeing, and Nick, I don't think you are either, Yeah, that because at this point they'd probably be holding those guys out too, and they're not. So,
and the subsequent moves that, if they come, I think are more summer things. I think you would want, if you're going to trade Kreider or Zibanejad, I think you're probably doing that in the summer, because in the summer there's more liquidity. Everybody has more cap space. Everybody's more amicable to big trades. It's hard to execute the big trade in season. I think those are more of transitional moves that'll happen in the summer when the Rangers have a better idea of where other teams are at, and frankly where they're at. If they sneak into the playoffs and win a round, maybe they're a little more amicable to running it back and trying to figure out the right mix of the old heads and the younger guys. I don't know. It's a real conundrum they're facing there.
We got another comment question from Alan Anderson on YouTube. Any chance we get Brandt Clark from LA? Good luck.
Probably not for Riley Smith.
Yeah.
You would need to give up more for that. I like Brandt Clark, but you would need to give up more. The Rangers, I know we've been hearing, they want to be targeted buyers. The only way they really want to go out and acquire someone is if they have term. Excuse me. They don't have the full trough of assets. They don't have, where's their picks? They don't have a 1 this year because they traded that for Miller. Next year, they don't have a 2 or a 4. The year after that, they don't have a 2 or a 4. So they don't have a full coffer of picks. That you probably don't want to burn assets on anything that's expiring this year unless it's a restricted free agent who you have team control over. I think that wouldn't really make sense.
I would love Brandt Clark, 22. He's somebody that is going to be a solid player in the NHL. Good luck getting LA to trade him to you.
Yeah, LA's an older team. They have a decent second wave of younger guys, but their most important players are older. They want to hold on to as many of those pieces as they can to try and ease that transition so they don't end up like Pittsburgh is, when once Kopitar and Doughty hang it up. You don't want to end up where Pittsburgh is, where you're entirely dependent on your old guys, and then you fill out your bottom 6 with guys like Kevin Hayes, Matt Nieto, 40-year-old Jeff Carter. You don't really want to do that.
I mean, there's an argument to be made that okay, well, if LA really likes a player like Matthew Robertson, for example, okay, well, if they really want Robertson, if they really want a future third for Clark, plus other things, I wouldn't imagine that LA would just give up Brandt Clark that easily. But there's an avenue for it to happen. It just very much hinges on which, I would imagine, young players LA would want in return. And if they want Robertson, then okay, that's a conversation that we'd be willing to have. If they want Berard, if they want, obviously the Rangers aren't trading Gabe Perreault for Brandt Clark, but all of that conversation hinges upon, okay, who does LA want, and can we have that conversation? Brandt Clark is going to be a great player. He's already is an NHL player at this point of his career. He's going to get better. There's an avenue to be created, but it's paved by LA and who they would want in return.
Okay. The last thing we should hit on before we get out of here, because we're running a little long, we should talk a little bit about the playoff math, because that's a little more topical. They have a big game tonight against the Islanders, which really the next week and a half basically tells you if they have a chance or not, because we were talking about it before we went live. But tonight, the Islanders. Wednesday is Washington. Saturday, Sunday is Ottawa, then Columbus, then Winnipeg, then Minnesota, then Columbus again. By that second Columbus game, you'll probably know whether or not the Rangers can do this or not. We're sitting here, it's March 3rd. If you go and look at the standings, the Rangers have 64 points after 60 games played. They are currently on pace for 87 and change standing points, which rounds up to 88. That would lead them 2 points out of the last playoff spot if everybody were to maintain their current points pace. If over the final 22 games, the Rangers are probably going to need to win something in the ballpark of 12 of their final 22, which doesn't sound like a lot, but based on what's going on around you, it might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less. This is going to be a tall order for a team that hasn't been consistent all year. And it's not impossible. They also are being helped by the fact, like we said at the top, no one wants this spot. Nobody wants this last playoff spot, regardless of how well they're playing. They will know within the next week if they can do this or not. Ottawa twice and Ottawa once and Columbus twice. That'll probably determine your season.
Yeah, we will know by middle of next week. I would even go as far to say as, because they play Columbus on the 15th again. I would go so far as to say they're playing the Islanders tonight. Like you said, Washington Wednesday, Ottawa Saturday, and Columbus Sunday. The game against Ottawa essentially determines their season.
Yep.
For lack of a better way to say that, because the game against the Islanders is obviously massive. They have to win this game for sure, but Ottawa is the team directly ahead of you in the standings. They are 2 points ahead of you. By all, we've said this before, say it again. Like, on paper, the Rangers are a much better team than Ottawa. But right now, Ottawa is playing better, even though, they've slipped the past couple of games, and they are ahead of you in the standings. This is not like crucial isn't even the right word to say it. Like, this is a critical game on Saturday. Today's game is pretty damn critical too, but the game against the game on Saturday against Ottawa essentially determines, hey, are you for real or are you pretending to try to make playoffs here? Because if they can beat Ottawa, okay, well then they have another critical game against Columbus, who are also right ahead of them in the standings as well. Columbus is a critical game, but Ottawa is directly in front of you. They are not a great team by all, at all intents and purposes on paper, which, hockey is not played on paper. We know this. We've talked about this, but just, as an ethereal conversation, this is a team the Rangers should beat. So if you go into a game against a team that you should beat in order to essentially, for lack of a better way to say this, like save your season, and you don't win that game, the conversation ends there. That is the end of the conversation, regardless of, like, even if you go into Columbus and you beat Columbus, you have to beat Ottawa first.
Yep.
If you cannot beat Ottawa, the conversation is over. The book is closed. The final period was written. It's off to proofreading. The book is being sold. It's done. If you beat Ottawa, the book is still being written. And you have big games elsewhere, but that game is going to tell everybody, including yourselves, everybody on the team, okay, is this something we can salvage or is it over? That game against Ottawa is the biggest game of the season, bar none.
And you got to get there. That's the other thing. Like, you got, like, the Islanders are almost dead, but they're also not far enough out of the mix that you can really afford to lose. And, like, even once you get past Islanders, Washington, Ottawa, Columbus, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Columbus again, you still have to play Edmonton, Calgary, Toronto, Vancouver, LA. That's 5 straight games against a playoff team. You got Anaheim, San Jose, who both stink, okay. Minnesota, the Devils, Tampa Bay, all 3 teams in the mix for playoff spots. Philly, who's not. The Islanders again, Carolina, Florida, Tampa Bay. It is going to be a brutal last month of the season for this group. And it's not disqualifying. You can beat teams that are better than you. That's the beauty of sports. You do get to go out there and play the games. Maybe Florida, they're resting people down the backstretch. Tampa Bay, maybe they got guys who are a little nicked up, and that's something you can worry about then. But you got to get there. And you don't get to get there without taking care of your business first. It's incremental progress along the way. Playing the way they did against Nashville, and we said it when they played Buffalo, and they played atrociously against Buffalo. Buffalo's not good, but if you give them chances, they will beat you. Last night, Nashville gave the Rangers a million chances, and they beat them. That's what happens in the NHL if you take advantage of those opportunities. Now, the problem is when you play better teams, they make fewer mistakes. There's less opportunistic chances to create off of. The Rangers must have had at least 9-10 odd man rushes last night to create off of because Nashville was constantly pinching. It was one defenseman up high. They were constantly getting caught in transition. They were able to overlap with the defenseman where Miller or Schneider would go in deep over a forward and push the net front. But this is it, man. It is a testament that they have to this group that they haven't totally folded, because it would have been very easy to just kind of give up. But at the same time, you do have to go out there and play these games, and you do have to win a good chunk of these. And There's a lot of hard games down the backstretch of this schedule. There are not a lot of easy games. Like even Anaheim and San Jose, those are in the middle of a West Coast swing where you're going to be in California for a week and a half, which probably not going to be the best as far as how you feel. And everyone's hurt. Everyone's tired because it's March in the NHL and you got to go out there and do it.
You got to, first of all, you can only beat who's in front of you.
Yep.
You got to, but you have to get there. For the LA, for the, California swing to matter by that point, you still have to win a good amount of the games before then. If you beat Ottawa, you beat Columbus, let's just say because like Winnipeg is a tough team to beat. Let's just say they lose to Winnipeg, they maybe lose to Washington. Like, okay, you still, maybe you beat Columbus again, maybe you beat Calgary, you're hanging around in that spot, then that is going to matter. But if you lose to Ottawa, you lose to Columbus, like let's say you beat Winnipeg, but you lose to Minnesota, lose to Columbus again, then how tired you are come the Cali trip doesn't even matter at that point. You have to get to a point where the future continues to matter in the grand scheme of this season. If you want us to talk about the margins on a couple weeks from now when you have to beat Anaheim if because that's 2 points, that's important for the playoff. Okay, well LA is going to be a crucial game because Rangers are hanging on to a playoff spot by 1 point and they have to beat, like, for us to get there, you got to go beat the Islanders tonight. You got to go give Washington a really tough battle. You have to beat Ottawa. That's the season. Hopefully you probably have to beat Columbus. And then we can have a conversation about this next Monday. But these next 4 games, without winning 3 of them, pretty much, none of that's going to matter.
And that's the beauty of it. You get to go and prove it. If you think you're being disrespected and nobody believes in you, prove it. Go out there and do it. That's the beauty of sports. It's why we all get entranced and we all get pulled in, because this is the only direct walk of life where, like, you don't have to get things to go your way. It's not like normal people at their workplace where they submit stuff to a team or whatever, and eventually it goes through the proper channels and it gets approved or disapproved. You can go out there and materially change your own circumstances with your own 2 hands and your own 2 feet. Get moving, get to work. You play like you did last night against Nashville for the next few weeks, you'll have a good chance. It's not going to be easy, but you'll have a chance.
The Rangers dictate their own future.
Yep.
And we will see who the Rangers really are over the course of the next few weeks.
Yep.
Even if they're sellers or like tentative buyers with like, young projects or something along those lines of, guys that have term that the Rangers could kind of mold into whatever they want. Let's just say they're going to sell Riley Smith. They're going to maybe, buy on a couple of like, low hanging fruit or they're not going to explode at the deadline. This is essentially who the Rangers now are. Yep. And we will see who they are over the course of the next couple of weeks. They know very well where they sit in the playoff hunt. They know. Believe me, they know. As much as we know, they do for sure. They are in control of their future.
They're in control of their future, which is what's beautiful about this.
Yeah. Not only are they in control, okay, well, that. Now go out there and show me that you know that. Because if they play like they did against Buffalo, this conversation's over. But if they go out there and they play like they did against Nashville, all right, then we're cooking.
Yeah, you got to find that middle ground. You got to find a consistently higher middle ground. But that'll do it for this week's show. Got to get in under an hour so the rerun later tonight doesn't get clipped. If you could be so kind, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. The plan is to go live Friday for pretty much all day, doing trade deadline stuff as the day goes around. Andrew's calling in from work. I've got a bunch of guests lined up, so it'll be a fun time to come hang out. Planning going 10 a.m. Eastern to about 4:30 Eastern. Want to get those last few trades as they come in over the wire. We'll have something else later in the weekend, either Saturday or Sunday, unless the Rangers do their business before then, in which case we'll have it for you guys then. Talk to you guys real soon.
Later.